Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. I'm Brennan Decora, and on this show, we focus on techniques for inspired studio performances. Each week, I host experts from across the industry. Let's get started. On today's show, we have Damon Tedesco. He's a scoring engineer with credits on Family Guy, American Dad, Animaniacs, Looney Tunes, and Hocus Pocus 2. Enjoy. So first and foremost, I want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. This will be fun.
Awesome. I'd like to start, if you could kind of go over your backstory, kind of what led you to engineering, how you got to where you are, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you bet. Well, when I was growing up, I was into techie stuff. You know, I was I had a lot of audio gear. I was a mobile disc jockey back in the day. Right. I was always collecting gear. And then once I started getting into the technology of it, I really dug it, you know. For me, my dad was a studio musician, so I didn't go to sessions and stuff. I just, but he had amps and guitars and stuff like that. So I'd kind of tool around with that stuff. And then once I started going to sessions of his, kind of in high school, I was like, wow, this is really, really cool.
Nice.
And I wasn't a very great musician. I played guitar for a long time. I played saxophone for a long time. Not really good on that front. So I got into the tech of it and really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Went to university for it. I went to Loyola Marymount University and studied there, and then got a job as an assistant. And I wasn't even an assistant. It was like answering phones at a studio called Evergreen, which is still there in Burbank.
Okay, yeah.
And then did that for a bunch of years, and then just kept my reputation clean and tried to keep working. And and then from there, I went to Warner Brothers Scoring.
Right.
Got a job there. I was there for 7 years, and then hustled to try and get a job at Fox Scoring.
Yeah.
And then was able to get that job as an assistant, and then I've kind of been there kind of off and on ever since. So that was like 22 years ago, 25 years ago.
I want to take a moment to pause. Anyone watching the video, we are actually at the Fox scoring stage now.
Yeah,
so it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate
for sure. This is such an amazing place, amazing room. Great scores have been done here, and great experiences. So
awesome.
I feel really lucky.
Definitely. Awesome. I mean, one of the things I like to talk about a lot on the podcast is kind of how to get good results from artists in the studio. And I know on the scoring side, it's a little bit different because, often the composer is sort of the artist.
Right.
So, like, how do you kind of set that tone with a composer, let's say you haven't worked with before, to figure out what their vision is for the project and kind of get, inside their head about it?
When you work with a new composer, it's difficult sometimes because you got to try and figure out what they're about, what their music's about, how they interact with their client. Sometimes it's stressful,
right?
And then how they interact with musicians. So, for me, I guess my mode is to try and be obviously a support because I'm there to support what they're doing.
Right.
I also want to be great with the musicians, so I'm always trying to be. Trying to work with them because the more comfortable the musicians are, the better the results, the better the recording, the easier the recording. So I think a lot of that is really in the prep work.
Right.
So and it kind of goes by and you don't even realize it a lot of times. Yeah. You might have a great session and everyone will be like, "Wow, that was great," and it was super smooth, and you don't realize why.
Right.
But there's a lot of the why that happens ahead of time. Building proper Pro Tools sessions, making sure it matches the bars and beats and the click and the pre-records, and then dealing with your assistant on stage, and then dealing with the recordist who's running Pro Tools. So I think a lot of that stuff is pretty invisible, hopefully, to the composer and to the client.
Right.
Also,
I wanted to mention, too, like, most times when you're doing a record or something, nowadays it's super rare to get hardly any prep time in the studio. Normally it's like you roll in and you're setting
up. Just like boom, you're doing it. Yeah.
Where most scoring stages and big productions like this, like there's a day of in advance of
Right.
setting the room up and getting it all prepped. So it's totally a different world.
Yeah, it's
completely.
really fortunate to have a setup day or a setup half a day or whatever to
Right.
be able to test things out. I'm not a huge fan of just rolling in and just going, let's roll with it. Let's try and make it,
Right.
you know me enough to know
Yeah.
that's, I don't like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that's something that keeps kind of slipping away a little bit. I think budgets are tight where they're like, well, wait a minute, there's only 12 cues. Why do we have to do a setup? Or why do we
Right.
why do we have to pay anyone to do Pro Tools? Or why do we have to
Jeez,
pay
yeah.
me to do like prep at home to build your Pro Tools sessions?
Right.
And I'm like, well, when we roll into a scoring stage, if we get there 2 or 3 hours early, that's supposed to be just to double check everything.
Right.
That's not supposed to be to build everything.
Yeah.
Because, especially when you've got live musicians here that are on the clock, it gets
Yeah.
really expensive really fast.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. No, it's, with any orchestral session,
It's
it
thousands of dollars an hour. Yeah,
It racks up really fast.
for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most underrated skill with scoring?
I think being able to look at scores and to be able to follow along with the music and then to be able to really know if you have something or don't have something.
Right.
So like when they go through a piece and you go, because the Pro Tools editors, they're so great. They cut things together like on the fly, and then the composer comes in for a playback.
Right.
And it's already cut together. So I think if you can look at a score and be reading it and understanding, okay, you know what, we never got this entrance. It's always been bad.
Right.
And you don't realize that stuff until you get to the mix. If there even is a mix, sometimes
Exactly.
it's a live mix where you just ship it, you know?
That's crazy.
So I think it's a skill set of just being able to really listen to the score and not get enamored by what you're doing.
Right.
And really check it out and go, you know what, we never got this. Let's just do an insert of that real quick.
Right.
And then, and that always saves you or coming up with ideas on the production side of things where, if they say, okay, great, we got it. We might say, hey, can we get this thing just by itself separately because you may need that somewhere else. So that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think if you're looking at your, like I guess it would be a recording list. If you're looking at that and you kind of look at it and go, okay, well, if we need to have this later, let's do that. So it's that kind of thinking where it's it's just experience. You just do it enough and then you realize you need to do other stuff.
And often, there'll be like a composer's assistant, for example, that's in the room reading the score, kind of looking for those things, but working with them and also working together. It's, it's definitely a good skill.
It's really good to have multiple sets of ears on a project.
Exactly.
Usually either the composer's out there or in here, depending. And then there's like an orchestrator and there might be a booth reader.
Right.
And the booth reader is really important. It's great to have. And then, you as an engineer, and then if there's any other type of people that are, listening.
That actually, I want to touch on this too, because, I still remember the first time I ever set foot in a scoring stage. It blew me away with how huge the control room is.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it.
Right.
But then I was in on a session, you realize there's
so
many people.
There's so many different people.
Yes. Like, how do you navigate that when there's and a lot of those people are just here for the show. They're not going to contribute anything. They're just there to watch. But sometimes there's the peanut gallery in the back. So
there's definitely that. I think what's funny is I always tell composers if they can get a director or a producer in here on a live scoring session, they come in and they walk out on stage and they hear live musicians and they see it on the big screen. Their attitude changes. They go, oh my goodness, I want to do this every single time. Right? So that's what we need for this business. We need multiple people doing that.
Exactly.
Right? So as far as the peanut gallery, what happens a lot of times is the director or the producer have been killing themselves working forever on their film. And this is like the last step of like, okay, now I get to hang. So now they're bringing their family and they're bringing people. And then it just gets to be a big, sea of people in the backfield. Sometimes it gets a little crazy, but I'm for some reason I'm kind of used to like the chaos, so it doesn't. I don't really hear it. It's just kind of like background noise,
right.
you know, when they're talking and asking for the Wi-Fi and everything else. Like, it's usually more about that.
Right, for sure. And how has your approach to mixing and engineering evolved over your career, especially with complex projects?
I think it evolved. I mean, I think I started really early in Pro Tools, like Sound Tools, and then Pro Tools Deck, you know, which is 4 channels. And so I was kind of in the early stages of that stuff. So I think that really helped me a lot, because then I was able to understand, you know, I was like on a crossover between analog and digital.
Right.
So there's a lot of people that jump in now and they're just digital. I was kind of in that in between, which was great, because then you can really appreciate what Pro Tools can do.
Right.
So I was a real, I was going to say avid Pro Tools guy, but that just is annoying, so I'm not going to say that. I will never say that again. That's freaking annoying. It's so stupid.
That's awesome.
So, but I was always in early, you know, so I think that kind of helped things, because then I understood what needed to happen.
Right.
Then the Pro Tools sessions started getting larger and larger and larger, and now it's to the point where it's ridiculous. You know, there's almost no limitation as far as track count and everything else.
Yeah.
So for me, I've always been kind of a less is more person, where I might look at the room and I go, okay, 4 mics on this is for, you know, 26 strings. That's going to be fine.
Right.
2 on these are going to be fine. 3, you know, and then some people do stand, you know.
Right.
For me, I think I like the approach of, let's hear the music, let's see what can cover it, and then if we need to have a couple extra here and there, fine.
Right.
So I was always kind of a minimalist to begin with, but then once it broke out into Pro Tools being every track, everything, you know,
Right.
I still try and go almost to the analog approach of like, can you fit this in tighter? Can we not do every mic on every person?
Yeah.
You know? So I think a lot of that has to do with the score. There's some scores where I work on it and I go, you know, I almost apologize to myself and any of the stage crews where I'm like, I know you guys are going to give me shit, but I have to put a mic on every woodwind because when we get into the mix, they're going to be like this up, that down, you know, which gets me mental, but that's fine, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's how it kind of changed over time, but I kind of resist that change.
Right.
You know, of the more.
For sure. And obviously a lot of scoring stages are set up for surround sound and have been for a very long time.
Sure.
Have you guys been doing any Atmos stuff? Is there
this room in here, Jim Wright, who's an amazing engineer, they just wired this for Atmos.
Okay.
So it's ready to go, or almost ready to go. We have been recording extra mics for Atmos for a long time.
Right.
Because people either bring their projects somewhere else and mix, or they mix it at their studio or whatever they need to do. We haven't done it in this room yet.
Okay.
So I'm sure it's a matter of time. This is set up for, you know, for 7.1, and then I'm sure it'll whenever it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Of course. Have you been doing any on your own projects at home, or?
I haven't. I've delved into it a little bit, but I haven't gotten, you know, like the people that are really great at it, like Steve Genowick and these people that are way deep into Atmos.
Yeah.
They're so good at it, and I haven't gotten calls for it. So I'm kind of like, well, see what, you know, see where it goes.
And
I don't know.
Not only that, but in the film side of things, most of the time the music isn't actually in Atmos.
Right.
You know, they just want the music in 5.1
they want it in 5.1 or 7.1,
yeah.
and then they'll deal with it.
All the sound effects and all that stuff is in Atmos.
Right.
They don't care about, you know.
Yeah, it's I love going to events where there's great engineers that are showing off Atmos and showing off, like, you know, Met Alliance does a great thing, and so I've done a bunch of those, you know, where I've gone to learn stuff, but I haven't delved in, not yet.
Cool.
So
awesome. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. Could you talk about a collaboration that has significantly impacted your professional perspective or technique?
I'm really lucky in the way that since I worked at Warner Brothers for so many years and Fox for so many years,
Right.
my professional collaboration is not really with the composers, it's with other engineers.
Of course.
So I'm super lucky that, people like Sean Murphy, Dennis Sands, Bobby Fernandez, Bruce Botnick, all these people come through.
Right.
So Sean Murphy, you're dealing with people and they're saying, okay, I like to do it this way.
Right.
I'm like, that's interesting. And then next engineer. And then, so before you know it, in your head, you've got, 15 or 20 top people in your head of how they mic a piano or how they do strings or how they, So really for me, that's the professional collaboration.
Right.
Is dealing with every engineer since 1993, 94.
Right.
And just learning what they do.
Yeah.
And even if it's not top people, even if it's just mid-level people,
Exactly.
there's so much to learn from all these different engineers that come through. So I feel really fortunate for that. There's some engineers that get kind of like, I don't know if they like to assist or help out or do, with other engineers. They've gotten beyond that, which I get. That's totally cool.
Right.
But I still find it great to be able to still try and learn from people.
Right.
So even if people are doing stuff that I think, I wouldn't do that, but that's all great.
Yeah.
See what happens. And then the proof is when you walk in and listen in the control room and go,
right.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
I definitely wouldn't do that.
Exactly. Definitely wouldn't do that. No, it's all good, but it's fun to really hear what people are doing. So.
Yeah. And most of the time I've found engineers are very forthcoming about sharing and, instructing and answering questions and all that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just a lot to learn. And now with, shows like this and everything that's happening, I was, pre-internet guy. So it was like we had to learn from each other.
Right.
We couldn't, there was no resources, other than like Mix Magazine and stuff like that. But this is such a different world. It's great.
Definitely. Awesome. Looking back, is there a project that you feel was pivotal in defining your style and approach to the studio?
Well, I think, the project that I work on with Walter Murphy, which is Family Guy and American Dad, I was fortunate to get to do an assisting position on that for many years with Armin Steiner, who was a mentor, And then once Armin handed the baton to me, or however we want to talk about it, Walter was gracious enough to hire me for that.
Right.
So for the last few years, a bunch of years I've been doing that.
Nice.
For me, that's my favorite thing because it's live mixing.
Okay.
So it's literally setting levels for the record, and then your mix, your 5/1 mix, goes to to the film.
Huh.
So
Crazy.
If we work from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, at 1 o'clock or earlier sometimes, that's it. We're done. We packed up and that gets shipped. So that's my absolute favorite way to work, is to do the live mix, because you're feeling like, you're just kind of on edge and, so that kind of live mixing was great. And then I did Animaniacs for Steve and Julie Bernstein, and that was a lot. That was all live mix as well.
Nice.
Theirs was a little bit different, where we would come back, and if we played back, we played a game, Love It or Remix It. So it was like, love it or remix it, And then it's like either we like it, or if we remix it, then I'm just making a couple adjustments and then reprinting it.
Right.
So, I was lucky to have to be on that project as well. And that was really great to have people around you that really knew you and supported the project. I love those sessions because those were a double session. So that was like 10 a.m. to 5.
Okay.
So it was 2 big full sessions.
Right.
Yeah, that's my favorite kind of stuff. So if I could do live mixing like that, that's what I want to do.
That's crazy to me, because like when I first was looking into getting in the industry, I was actually inspired by going to a concert and seeing a live sound engineer.
Right.
But I immediately knew, it was like, okay, that's a little too stressful for me. I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want to go to the studio. But now you're saying it's like we're in the studio, but live mixing.
Exactly. It's still the same anxiety that you feel on a live show is what's happening here. Yeah.
And obviously the composer is with you in the room, or is they're on the podium?
They're either on the podium or in the room.
Okay.
For Walter Murphy's session, there's a conductor, John Els, who's out on. He's conducting.
Right.
Walter Murphy's in here.
Okay.
And then so any cues or anything that needs to happen, that's happening here.
Right.
On the Animaniacs thing with Steve and Julie, Steve would conduct and Julie was in the booth. So they were.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
it was great. It was really nice to be,
so
supported.
Then the ones where, the conductor's in the booth, it's like, obviously there's a level of trust there. I mean, especially because you're live mixing. It's like, how do you, navigate that? Was there any planning or anything like that in
No,
advance,
you kind of figure out what the style of music is and what you're going to bring to the table.
Right. Right.
There's a composer, Carl Johnson, that I've done a bunch of episodes for Looney Tunes for.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that same type of thing where it's live mix, plus he's out there and, conducting. And I think once you get enough experience on being able to live mix and be able to deliver what they think, and you're following the score, so you're kind of like, okay, at this point, there's a trumpet wah, or trombone wah, or trumpet muted solo, so you got to push that and then pull it down, push it, pull it. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's fun. It's stressful, but it's fun.
Yeah, nice. Nice. And how do you stay creatively inspired and avoid burnout, especially when working on demanding projects?
Man, now that's hard. That's hard because I don't feel like when I'm engineering or when I've got the gig to do engineering, I don't burn out because I'm like so excited to be there.
Right.
I think the burnout happens when you're just either waiting for the next gig or you're hustling for the next gig or you're so frustrated because you haven't gotten the call. Right. Or you get the FOMO thing because you're looking on Facebook and going, Jesus, how are all these people working and I'm not? So that's the honest answer is I don't really get burned out from engineering. I get burned out from the hustle.
Right.
And the race of it.
Sure.
Friends of mine laugh because my license plate says get the gig, So, and it's about that.
Yeah.
And years ago I thought, it's not that anyone can't do this because I think that a lot of people can do this and a lot of people are great at it, right? But it seems like more of the hustle and the political environment to try and maintain anything. So that feels like more of an important race than anything else. Right.
And, most of us are freelance at this point, so it's like you're running a business, really.
You're absolutely running a business. Like back in the day of, Armin Steiner and Denny Wallen and Bobby Fernandez and all these other people of being able to have incredible staff positions at a scoring stage.
Right.
Man, that must have been fun. I mean, I see Jim found the schedule or the book of like the 60s and 70s and went through the catalog of all the different shows that were done here, TV shows, and it was like, on this date we did MASH, on this date we did, and it was like boom, 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 boom. I mean, how incredible to be able to know a room so well, and be on staff. So that's really, that doesn't happen anymore. That's crazy. We're all freelance.
Yeah. And I mean, you sort of just answered this, but how do you think the industry has changed in terms of production values and expectations over the years?
I think the difficult part now is that with the lack of picture ever being locked, you're completely at the mercy of picture editorial.
Wow.
So you're basically doing music and you hope it's going to stick, and then often the picture will change, or you leave things long because you don't know where they're going to cut, and So I think the delivery to the dub stages are really thick now too.
Yeah.
So you're delivering 10 7/1s or more.
Wow.
So you're delivering all the different elements, and they normally do. Obviously they do a great job because they know what they're doing.
Right.
But there's such flexibility that sometimes poor composers hand the stuff over and they don't know really what's going to happen until till it's done.
Jeez.
There might be sections muted. There might be
Right.
elements turned on or turned off or volumed up or
Right.
volumed down or literally moved. So
Yeah.
they might move stuff. And I think that's the tough thing. It's not like in the day where you go, okay, we're going to spot this picture, we're going to do this, and we're going to record this, and then
Right.
have a nice day.
Right.
It's like after we do the recording, we don't really know what's going to happen.
Jeez.
So when we play back on a scoring stage and we go, great, love it, everyone loves it, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, love it now because we don't know what's going to happen. You know, but there's still a lot of processes
Right.
that are still going to go after this.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's probably why I like the live mix thing because I'm doing it, and I don't even think we ship stems. We
Really?
just do the mix,
Okay.
ship that, and then if they ever have to dig in, then they can.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's
cool.
kind of probably why. Maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe it's just like I like locking it in. You know?
Right.
So.
Oh, good. What's a common myth about film scoring or engineering that you'd like to debunk?
I think it's that it's going to be easy to get in.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds shitty.
That's not a myth.
It's not a myth, right? Exactly. But I think
Yeah.
it's like one of those things that when I was 21, 22 and I was studying and working and I was in the industry,
Right.
I figured, shit, this is like a 5-year plan. I'm fast tracking.
Right.
No, you're not. No.
Yep. It's the same for me.
Not only do you not have the experience, you don't have the skills, you don't have the ear, you don't have the knowledge, you
Right.
don't have the political
Yeah.
environment sense. So it takes so long that I think, that's something that I wish I would have known earlier.
Right.
Like I knew it was going to take a long time, but I
Yeah.
didn't think it was going to take 25 years to do anything for real,
Right.
Maybe I would have bailed out. I don't know. I
Yeah.
just was, maybe if I was ignorant and just kept working, then
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So it's funny because even like 5 or 6 years ago, I talked to a head of music person, and I was talking to them about mixing or recording or whatever,
Right.
and it was like, well, they're never going to hire you for do that. I'm like, really? And they're like, oh yeah, they wouldn't hire you because you don't have a bunch of giant films under your belt.
Right. Jeez.
And I'm like, oh my God, that hurts.
Right,
And I'm like
right.
50, I'm like, at the time, I'm like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of the harsh reality. And
Right.
then you realize, okay, well, that's the same with composers.
Yeah.
They're not going to hire a composer that's an unknown because there's the variables of they won't deliver.
Right.
And if they don't deliver, then somebody's ass is on the line.
Absolutely.
So people are not going to try a new mixer, a new engineer. They're not going to try a new composer.
Right.
And that's why you do see these teams of great teams, that come through and knock it out because they've got a deep roster of people that will make sure it goes over the finish line.
Right.
So,
right. And it's interesting too because obviously we're talking about like the very top of the game here.
Right.
Like I feel like there's a huge amount of the industry that's maybe not the very tip top.
Yep.
But that, there's scores of people.
Yeah.
Pun intended,
Yeah.
but
Nicely done.
there's tons of people that make a great living and have a great career.
Sure.
Sure they're not Sean Murphy, they're
Right,
not
right,
Dennis
right.
Sands,
Yeah.
but they're having a great career. So
Yeah, and I think that's the difference from. I think that a lot of that changed where we meaning like middle people, like the middle meat and potatoes people that did a lot of stuff. That's really changed a lot because there was a lot of that middle ground work.
Right.
And now it's kind of separated, and now you've got the high end and you've got the low end. So you've got that middle ground that's kind of disappearing.
Okay.
Jeez. which is really hard.
Yeah.
So the middle ground disappears, or what happens is the middle ground disappears. So if we were all in the middle, which we were kicking ass, then we either drop our rates because the high end people are dropping their rates to pop in the middle. So there's that whole kind of balance. Yeah. So it's
exactly.
It's tough.
That's crazy. And is there one scoring project that really pushed you out of your comfort zone, and how did you handle it?
I don't know if I've gotten to the point of where something's really out of my element because I don't think I would even be considered for it if I was.
Right.
No, honest to God,
Yeah.
you know. And that's a dumb answer, but it's true
No,
because
it's true.
the stuff that I get called for, people are like, "Oh, you would be great for this." I'm like, "You know what? You're right. I would be
Right.
great for this." You know.
Right.
But anything that's like completely out of bounds, I would be like, "I'm
Yeah.
not the right person for that."
Yeah.
So whether they're, you know, I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
hard question, but it's not
No, I get it.
really
yeah.
a bullshit answer. But it's just
Totally.
like,
Makes sense.
yeah, I don't think I would even be considered for it
Right. Right.
unless I felt confident and they felt confident.
Yeah. Awesome.
You know.
Is there a moment in your career where a unique production challenge led to an unexpected creative breakthrough?
Yeah, let me think. I think a lot of times things happen where you don't know if it's in your skill set or not, even if
Right.
it's not scoring.
Yeah.
So somebody like I did re-recording mixing for a lot of short films, and I did something for Paul Oakenfold that was really a fun
Okay.
project. That was
Nice.
I've always been a fan of his work and music,
Mhm.
but he did a documentary on basically doing a DJ set on the base camp of Mount Everest.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, wow, that's cool. So
Nice.
I ended up getting that to do the re-recording mix on that.
Okay.
So I think that could have been out of my comfort zone,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
But that was also something that I'm like, this is really great. I love this. It's
Nice.
fun. It's still kind of music,
Mhm.
you know, and I'm still doing a lot.
Right. Right.
That's where you understand where all the dialogue editing I've done and all the music editing I've done really pays off.
Right. Right.
Because that's just skill sets that get thrown together and you kind of
Yeah.
go, oh, hey, I can pull this off.
Right. Exactly.
So that was probably a challenge that I'm like, okay, yeah,
Right.
you know. So
I've usually found where if you learn something a little bit, you'll get a call to do that, and you have to kind of step up.
Step up, yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
I could do that. you know?
Yeah, I remember like maybe 15 years ago, there was a call to do a front of house live sound thing.
Mhm.
And it was from people that I knew.
Right.
And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I don't really do that,
Yeah.
but you know, okay.
Yeah.
And then I show up and I did it, and I was nervous about it.
Mhm.
But you know, if you don't come in with attitude, and you know the people can support you at these locations, they were great, and I did a great job. And
Yeah.
you know, little by little, you keep getting better at it.
Exactly.
Some people go, "Oh, you do live sound?" You're like, "Why? What do you got?" You know, you kind of,
Right.
you know, you kind of go, you know.
Yeah.
But then it just you get more experience.
Exactly.
And so,
Yeah. Exactly.
but it definitely everything builds on it. You know.
Right. Right. And is there any current or recent projects that you're allowed to talk about that you want to?
Just did a Family Guy episode yesterday, and I'm
Right.
doing one on Monday. So
Nice.
that's my favorite stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for new TV or film projects like that.
Nice.
You know, that
Yeah.
can utilize that stuff.
Awesome.
So
Nice. I like to wrap up each podcast with the same kind of few questions.
yeah.
The first one is, who is your most influential teacher? And it could be a few if you want.
Most influential teacher. Probably two people. When I was at Loyola Marymount University, there was a gentleman named John Weaver,
Okay.
and he was the head of the department. And at that point, he was brought in because the department was kind of like in shambles, and he had to rework it. So he reworked it, and he was awesome. So he was definitely an inspiration for me and a mentor.
Okay.
And then really a couple engineers, Bobby Fernandez.
Yeah.
You know, I worked with, he was my first employer. He hired me at Warner Brothers.
Okay.
So I did that for a bunch of years. And then when I came to Fox, it was really Armin Steiner.
Right.
So, you know, he really showed me a lot of stuff and was very giving.
Nice.
So really, it's mentorship like that. It was like school plus professional.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Awesome.
those guys are amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
The next question, sometimes it doesn't work, but whatever. The question is, what is your favorite reference track? And a lot of guys don't have an answer for that because they work in the same places all the time.
Oh, I got you,
If
yeah.
you're trying to learn the studio,
Yeah.
what do you put on?
You know, I really like, there is a track by Marcus Miller, and It's on, I think it's on his M record, and it's
Okay.
called, goddamn, what's it called? Cousin something.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, and it's like my favorite track to play because it's a lot of nice low end. It's crisp. I can really hear everything.
Right.
And I also use that just for listening in the control room. But then when I go do live sound,
Okay.
I play that to check the level of the subs
Right.
because that can be deceiving too. So that's my favorite reference track.
Nice.
Either that or any of the Earth, Wind, and Fire stuff
Okay.
is incredible for me to be able to know because I know that stuff really well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Last question. What would be one tidbit for an upcoming engineer?
I think check the ego at the door
Yeah.
and learn from everybody and be cool to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds dumb, but it's like you really can learn from a lot of people and you can be cool to a lot of people and I think that will get you really far.
Right.
I don't understand the attitude of like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, well, no, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe
Yeah.
you do. I don't know, but
Right.
just be
Yeah.
cool.
Exactly.
I think that goes a long way. And I think all of us, we all cross paths
Yeah.
over the years. And sometimes I feel like I'm a survivor because I'll deal with other people and I'll be like, oh, yeah, they used to work at this place and now that place is gone, but they moved over here. And
Right,
so it's
right.
really a small community. You
is.
don't think
Yeah.
it's as small as it is.
Right.
But then you start realizing that everyone knows everyone. So,
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really
yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
it.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm really
Awesome.
glad to connect with you again.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Nice. Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Profiles. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.